Welcome to Let's Talk Markets. I am your host, Pink, and this week we have a very special episode for you. Dave Lauer sits down and talks to, her name is Tori, but you probably know her as Chairman Burb Bernanke from Twitter. Her title on LinkedIn is Chief Vibes Officer, and I really like that, so I think we're going to go with that. But this week, Dave sits down with Burb and talks about the recent news with Binance and crypto. So now we're going to tune into that conversation.
All right, thanks, Pink. I'm really thrilled to be here today with the one and only Chairman Burb Bernanke. Welcome to Let's Talk Markets, Burb.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, sure thing. We were talking earlier, and yes, we're going to talk a lot about crypto, but I think we need to talk about the potato diet.
That's where we're starting. Okay.
How can you not start with the potato diet?
We can start there, but we're going to wreck my credibility for the rest of this.
All right. As the potato diet, are there any tokens associated with it?
There are no tokens. There is no potato coin.
There's no decentralization.
No.
No. All right.
No. Please do not go find the nearest potato token and invest in it. That will not give me any money, and I will be very sad.
If you don't know what the potato diet is, this is your chance to Google it. We were talking about funny diet.
I always get their name wrong. Hold on. It is slime time, mold time, or something like that. Slime mold time, something like that. There's it's slime mold time mold. I always get that wrong. They have this very interesting, very in-depth, articles they wrote really about the mystery of obesity in America and the world really, and why everyone's getting so fat. And if it was really just stop eating and run more, then you would have figured that at least one of the countries on the planet would have reversed their obesity problem, and nobody has.
Right.
So they dug into kind of the why, and there's some factors out there that maybe are contributing to it. One of the theories
is it emulsifiers?
It might not be emulsifiers. It might be all of the plastic in the water supply. It might be some of the lithium in the water supply. It might have something to do with the altitude. If you look at things like altitude versus obesity, everyone that lives higher up in the U.S. is skinnier.
Wow, interesting. What about those of us in the north? It's cold up here.
Pretty perfect. It is cold up here, but it maps pretty perfectly. You can even see in obesity maps things like the Mississippi River and people around it being heavier than people that are in Colorado.
Wow.
Anyway, that whole thing.
You were getting markets in crypto, and here we are.
You thought you were getting markets. You're getting more potatoes. So, they also did a couple of ones where they debunked it's probably not seed oils, but it might be a combination.
I do avoid those.
A lot of people do avoid them, and they're kind of weird. So
because I've done my share of interesting diets. I carnivore for a while. I was keto for even longer. I'm on a relatively restricted diet right now, but I don't know. There's no danger of me getting fat. I'm doing it for other reasons.
I've done probably every single diet you can think of. I was a student athlete in college, and I had a weight restriction. So I've done all sorts of crazy things. And really, potato diet was just the idea that maybe there's something that we're not getting, and it's in the food, and let's try just eating potatoes. It's a nutritionally complete food. You get all of your vitamins and things from it, except maybe vitamin A, but if you put in a sweet potato, you're good. I still took a multivitamin just to make sure, because I didn't feel like reenacting The Martian. But
I know. How could you not think of The Martian when you talk about
I did. A lot of people made that joke with me a lot. But the idea is basically nothing but potatoes for a month.
Yeah, I love French fries, and you can eat fried potatoes,
French fries too.
Right? What's better than fried potatoes?
Look, I've done this diet twice, and there is nothing better on the planet than a fried potato in its best forms. But the idea was really, no dairy, no anything like that, just potatoes, and oils are okay. Some people handled oils better than others. And this was all for science. I should say this was for science. There was data, there's studies. They went and did analysis.
Crazy things for science. One time, let me tell you, I got a lumbar puncture
for science.
Yes.
That's hardcore.
Yeah, I was in a control group at a UPenn study on neurodegenerative disease, And first of all, finding out that I qualified for the control group was one of the greatest moments. Like,
that's pretty relieving,
news, right? What better news than that? And so I did all sorts of stuff. So I'm all there.
I'm all about, self-experimentation too.
Yes.
There's lots of, I don't know, advice out there that works for some people, doesn't work for others. Some people can eat whatever they want and lose weight. Some people, it's a struggle. So I'm all about experimenting to find what works for you. And the potato diet was honestly incredibly easy. It was one of the easiest diets I've ever done.
Yeah.
Like I was saying before, I had multiple times where I ate nothing but French fries all day. I had, Wendy's for breakfast, Nando's for lunch, McDonald's for dinner. And I don't know another diet where you can do that on. And I lost.
Well, carnivore, you can eat beef patties at any of those places too. Right?
You can eat burgers all day. That's pretty good.
Thing too. Yeah.
But yeah, I lost 12 pounds. My ADHD got better. My kind of ability to absorb it overall got better. I was able to drop my ADHD medication dose by a lot, which was really good for me in the end. And yeah,
fascinating is this.
It really changed a lot of things, and you don't even feel hungry. Like after the first day,
it was a riveting time in social media. I gotta say, your tweets.
I might do it again. I might be due for one.
All right.
Every once in a while, the most helpful part about it was really that it resets your entire idea of hunger. You just don't feel hungry on it. Because I think it's something to do with the fact that that all you're going to eat is potatoes, right? There's no snacking. There's no I'm going to get something else. It's just potatoes.
Eat later. Don't worry.
Exactly. And if you're going to have a meal, it's potatoes. So this whole concept of hunger kind of gets reshaped, and you realize you're I'm not actually hungry. I don't need to eat. And it shrinks your stomach, obviously, because you're not eating as much as you were before.
Yeah.
And people like to say that, it's a calorie diet thing. And I'm pretty sure that I ate more than 2,000 calories worth of potatoes most days.
It's a potato thing.
It's
all right. So from potatoes right to crypto.
Okay.
Let's make that segue. All right.
Sure.
This has been a pretty eventful, I don't know, week and a half in crypto world, right? It's like a decade happens in a week sometimes.
Yeah, there are weeks when nothing happens, and there are weeks when everything happens.
Yeah. So maybe let's just start real quick. For those who don't know, which who could possibly not know the chairman Burr Bernanke?
Me.
But what are you doing right now? How do you know anything about crypto? Why are you the awesomest person to have on this podcast to talk about?
Yeah, so right now I'm actually part of a team of people called Number Group Studios. We are a studio, a venture studio, and we are focused on crypto. I have worked on Solana DeFi. Before that, I worked at a brokerage. I've been both in product management positions, and I was actually just the person that answers the phone when you call a brokerage. And I had a stint at a prop shop in between that too. So I've kind of done a lot of things across finance. I have an econ degree. One of my last jobs I had the first time I was at the brokerage, which is actually when I started tweeting a lot. I was the last person you talked to really before you sued them. So if there was a dispute or something went wrong or something broke and you called in and you were like, my account is messed up, I was the one kind of behind the scenes going in and being like, well, I'm seeing what you did and you did this, or being like, we actually did mess up. You're right. We owe you money. So that was a very dynamic job. And I got to learn a lot of rules. I have 8 securities licenses. Not many people know that about me, but I have,
Jeez. I got
a
Series 7. I thought it was hot shit.
I have my Series 3, my Series 4, my 7, 9, 10, 66, and 63.
Damn. All right.
So I like tests. I like the rules. I am interested in the law. I've kicked around law school for a decade. I don't know. I figured there are easier ways to make a living. But yeah, so I have a little bit of background in that. And one of the things I do on Twitter is read lawsuits for fun. Which makes me sound like a really exciting person.
That was awesome.
But there's not.
Look at what social media has done.
Look at what social media has done for me. I read lawsuits for fun. 21-year-old me would be very upset hearing myself. I promise I was cool.
I think that you could say the same about 21-year-old Dave for sure. So don't worry.
I'm sure I was cool at one point, but not.
I was never cool, but I read lots of regulations now.
I
don't
think
I
was that. Cool. I don't know that anybody would agree with me.
All right,
but
that's
yeah,
good.
so reading
that's why I reached out.
That's me.
As part of your lawsuit reading, you put up a couple of great threads on the Coinbase and Binance actions. And so again, maybe for people who have been living under a rock for the last, I don't know, let's say 7 or 8 days, what has the SEC done here?
They've done a lot
at a high
of things.
level. Yeah, they've done a lot of
things. At a high level, they've started cleaning things up. There are a lot of people that will hear me say that and probably start immediately like, but Binance lawsuits and there's more than one. So I've done a lot of threats. Actually, I've done some of the Binance ones, some of the FTX ones, just a lot of bad behavior in securities law. But the Binance one is kind of different, in my opinion, than the Coinbase one. The Binance one, is it Binance? I have said this wrong probably my entire life.
This is the first time I've heard someone say Binance, and I'm thinking Bonanza now, but no, I mean, I say Binance because of finance, but
but that feels so
funny. I have all of these words in my vocabulary. Okay, we're going to go off on a tangent, but I got to say something. I have all these words in my vocabulary that I learned from reading because I read a lot. Exactly. And I learn words that I didn't ever hear people say. And so I say things in weird ways. Like I say paprika, and everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. But I don't know. That's just, no one ever said the word to me. I just say it. Based on what I read, the way I read it.
So I'm sure it's amazing that I'm able to communicate at all, to be honest with you.
Sometimes I feel that way.
So either one, matter. Anyway. Yeah. Right. So Binance, I guess, a lot of what the SEC has done in their lawsuit has pointed out everywhere that people have broken the law. There's a lot of things that were not quite kosher in there. And I don't think anyone that's defending it wholeheartedly can actually defend some of the things in there. And then the second part of that lawsuit, which overlaps more with the Coinbase one, is they named a bunch of individual cryptocurrencies or tokens or whatever phrase you want to use for it. They said they were securities. And they provided some reasoning for it in both. And I'm actually pretty sure it was the same copy and paste, because the language is exactly the same.
I thought it was funny.
I was kind of just like, hey, I'm repeating myself. This sounds familiar. But it was the same thing saying, all of these things are securities, or at least these specific ones are. And that has opened the door for a lot of arguments, and miscommunications and misconceptions, I think, about what some of those lawsuits are actually saying.
Okay, let me ask you one question. I want to start quickly. The securities thing is by far the most interesting part of this, but one of the accusations against Binance was about commingling of customer funds, and I had equated this to being somewhat similar to what FTX did. And I'm sure everyone is pretty well familiar with FTX at this point. So, I'm not going to go over it, but we'll talk about a little more detail in the blog post. But, do you think that was a reasonable analogy from a customer fund commingling perspective? Or did I miss something with that? Because a couple of people were like, no, you're wrong on that. It's not a good analogy.
I don't know. Because it wasn't super clear. They didn't necessarily come out and say, oh, this is all the same money. But a lot of it was that there's a trading firm that was a market maker. The FTX comparison is apt, at least in some regards. There was a market maker they were calling BAM Trading, and I'm pretty sure it stood for Binance, whatever. And that was using money that was also Binance money. No one's really sure what some of these pools of money.
Some customers were potentially sending money there instead of Binance,
I'm not
right?
Sure. It seems like there was definitely at least some question, but this is where we go when we're talking about, regulatory clarity, is no one's entirely sure what's going on there. And in the case of things like FTX, I'm not even entirely sure that they knew what was going on. At least to an extent. It's not like they were like, oh, gee, but
no, but it was so confusing and at such scale, and their books and records were so poor. They might have had a hard time.
When you have something like 70,000 transactions in a QuickBook file named Ask My Accountant, I don't know that you could have a good grasp on some of these things, So maybe.
Well, I mean, like the guy that they brought in, who his claim to John Ray's claim to fame was that he cleaned up after Enron. Said this was worth, and he was like,
it's bad when this is more of a mess.
Complicated here. He's like, this was just old-fashioned embezzlement, right?
They say that, but they keep finding money that they didn't know was there. So I don't know. It's really just, this was just a case of vanilla. If it was that easy, I think they probably would have it all figured out by now. But every once in a while, you still get like news like, they found another $1 billion. And I don't know how organized an embezzlement you can be if you're just finding $1 billion somewhere. That maybe isn't a reflection of reality.
There's still hope for getting some funds back, maybe.
There probably is. I mean, a lot of it seemed to have to do with the case of FTX with, the token price of FTT and that being a magic multiple leveraged collateral, let's use it for everything.
Right.
Which isn't how accounting works, but I guess
but it's nice if you pretend it is.
It works until it doesn't.
Yes, there you go, right? Like the characteristic pyramid Ponzi, it works till it doesn't. Okay, but let's get into the more interesting question. Yeah. Are these securities?
Some of them, honestly, in my personal opinion, I think so. I don't necessarily think that that's a death sentence for crypto. I don't think it's the end of the world. Traditional finance has figured it out too. We got things like options markets. Those weren't always exactly kosher. Even things like, if you look really historically back, like euro dollars started as demand for, dollar deposits overseas, and they were actually considered illegal at one point. So I think there's some parallels to be drawn between that and the current state of crypto, where a lot of it is just demand for, in essence, US dollars. Not that all crypto is obviously US dollars, but it's still trying to access the same financial systems. So, a lot of it, even if it is a security, I don't know that that's what's important. I think a lot of the things that they called security, they have decent reasoning for, especially with the overall kind of idea with a lot of the lawsuits that these people were out there tweeting things or tying the performance of the token to the performance of these teams or companies. And that's like definitionally a stock. You know what I mean? Like if company does good, then token go up. I don't know how that's fundamentally different from being a stock.
I don't know how people argue that some of these aren't. And, I think that's it, right? Like, it's the sort of classic definition, with the Howey test. But okay, so what's the big deal then? Okay, let's say some of these tokens are securities. Why is it that Binance and Coinbase, why does that put them into such a rough position?
I think it's more the fact that they're calling these things, they're saying these were securities and have been all along, and thus Coinbase and Binance are offering unregistered securities and are acting in a manner they shouldn't, which is somewhat of a fair argument too. Right. But there's a lot of, chicken and egg with that. Yeah. Where, yes, these things might have been securities, but they were functionally different in, there's things like, I think it's really interesting, certainly, that they're calling like Matic a security because it has a burn mechanism. So therefore, the supply can be manipulated, which means people will think the price goes up. I don't know that fits the definition of a security just because, supply go down, price go up. That can be a commodity, That's
right. That, oil like think about baseball cards that mothers have been throwing out over time. Does that make baseball cards a security?
So I actually love this argument.
Collectible.
I love this because there's a huge difference that everyone misses. There is an actual standard definition of what a financial asset is, and it does not include tangible objects. So things like Beanie Babies, art collections, cars, fundamentally not a security. They are a tangible asset. They are not an intangible thing that is representing some sort of financial contract. That's what makes something a financial asset, is there's this part of it that is intangibility. You can't hold Solana in your hand. You can't hold currency, some of these currencies in your hand. You can't necessarily hold a stock in your hand, but you can hold a Beanie Baby. you can hold an art
Right.
collection.
I did see someone on Twitter try to make the case that tokens were physical.
I think that might have been a reply to me. And
I think it was.
Yeah, it was something about the compute.
The electricity? Maybe that person tried to hold electricity in their hand, and that's why they are now making
why they were arguing.
Media.
Yeah. That might have something to do with it, because I'm not sure who's out there actually genuinely saying, no, these things are physical. Maybe if you put them in a ledger, but the ledger is what's physical, not the contents of the ledger. So
yeah, that's right.
I don't know. That's probably not the argument I would make. I would probably, like I said, talk more about how these things are really more of a commodity or a currency than they are a stock or an equity or something that should be under, like, it's really a matter of kind of jurisdictional, like, who do these things belong to be regulated? And it's not a death sentence for anything, like I said, but I think the CFTC is a little looser with some of their
for sure.
regulations.
I mean, the crypto industry certainly wants to be regulated by the CFTC. That's certain. And the CFTC is smaller. I think it's less of an assertive regulator than the SEC, and whether that's by design or by resourcing, that's
I also
how it
think
is.
they go after different things. I've seen a lot of CFTC kind of fining people or saying, hey, you broke the rules, for things like manipulation or price things like that. Whereas the SEC is kind of more, or I guess everybody else is kind of more going after high level stuff. I guess really what I'm trying to say there is the CFTC seems to go after like individual bad actors more than it does like a corn grower.
Right. Yeah. And again, like CFTC with commodities, you're dealing with certain things in the real world that are really important. And that's not to say capital formation and price discovery in terms of security markets is not really important, which obviously I believe it is. But, it's fundamentally different from like the impacts that the ability to hedge commodity prices has on the real economy and on producers and such. And it's just a fundamentally different area of enforcement to worry about.
Totally. And you have different concerns. So, the CFTC, I'm not going to say they're not concerned about investor protection. They definitely are. But there's, I think, less retail involved in kind of anything that falls into the CFTC's world.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's kind of more, you understand what you're doing with these products, which is not the case when it comes to protecting people on the retail side of things, especially with, as we've seen, like GameStop, AMC, all of that. How much of it is people not understanding it and how much of it is people needing to be protected is a really big point of argument, I think.
Yeah. And so, all right, let's talk about then. So the SEC, back to the SEC and enforcement actions, the Ripple case has been super interesting and probably very pertinent to what we're talking about now, because they first, there have been comments made as part of that case that the SEC pretty clearly considers many of these virtual currencies to be securities, and there was an alert in March of 2023 where they came out and they said, given that these are securities, if you're going to act as a broker, you better register as a broker. If you're going to act as a trading venue, you better register as an ATS or as an exchange.
Now that's, I think, where things get a little trickier. Not so much on the Ripple side. I actually don't know that much personally about the Ripple lawsuit. I have a friend who used to work at Ripple, so I've tried to stay away from that one. Just because I don't think I need to like pull myself into that. But when it comes to things like registration of ATSs and exchanges and all of that, I think you actually run into a real problem. And this is a thing where things are very different with things like DEXs. So when you have a decentralized exchange, that's a whole different ballgame. And I think all of these centralized exchanges are much easier to go after because, you've got a company, you've got a person that you can go to and be like, you need to register. But if you can just put some code out there and never touch it again, I'm not really sure how you get someone to regulate that.
I don't know. And the SEC wants to, right? In their the recent update, I think, to Reg ATS, they defined the communication protocol network to try and go after.
And that also makes a lot of things that weren't trading venues before, now trading venues.
Right.
To the point that even broker dealers were like, we need to think about this. So I think it's a hard thing to strike a balance on, because you want to be able to, say, hey, we need to be able to register and follow all these things and make sure everything's kosher. But at the same time, some of it really truly doesn't fit into existing framework. And I don't think you can just get around that by regulation, by enforcement. There does have to be some conversation, which I think they were probably having with Coinbase. And honestly, they're probably having with Kraken. Kraken has been very suspiciously absent from the news.
It has.
So I kind of wonder if maybe they have been doing all the right things and there's a reason the SEC is not talking about Kraken.
And there are, there are, I think, 2 ATSs, at least that I'm aware of, that registered specifically for the purpose of trading digital assets, right? You have T0 and you have Prometheum. So, with Coinbase, when we hear Brian Armstrong, we hear Coinbase say, hey, we went in, we tried to register, they wouldn't let us, we talked to them, they never got back to us. I feel like we're only hearing one side of that story.
I would love to know what the SEC thinks of that, but I also don't, really know how there's a good angle for the SEC there. Like if they, which I don't think is up for debate, that they didn't meet with the SEC, right? Like they did meet with them 30 something times, and we're clearly having some sort of conversation. So I don't necessarily think it's fair for everyone to be like, well, sorry, you still should have registered anyway. Like they were clearly trying to talk about that. I don't know what else they would be doing in those meetings. But, clearly talks broke down somewhere. And I don't know that Coinbase made it easy on themselves by being so antagonistic.
Right.
So
I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm gonna say that I think you and I actually have somewhat similar sort of orientation in this whole thing, in that we started in traditional finance, so we see the benefits of, let's say, current securities laws and such. We're really excited by certain crypto technologies and some of the promise there. I'm hopeful that there's a way forward, that we end up figuring out how the world of crypto and the innovation possible can live within either current or future, securities regulatory framework. I mean, is that where you're at?
Yeah, that's where I think there is a way. There has been a couple of bills that have been proposed, and there are definitely people in Washington, doing all this lobbying, trying to have productive conversations about how we can bring some of this financial innovation, because there has been, I think everyone can admit, there's been some cool stuff that's come out financially speaking.
For sure.
I think AMMs are cool. That didn't exist before. But there has to be kind of somewhere in the middle where people meet and talk about kind of the reality of, like, maybe some of this framework doesn't fit and maybe there is something better that people could be doing. And a lot of, I think the problem comes down to the fact that a lot of crypto has this very freewheeling ethos of, libertarian values of, like, I shouldn't die, it's my money and I shouldn't have to tell anyone what I do with it. And we're not beholden to a government, but, like, that's not really how, I don't know, OFAC laws work.
Right?
So there has to be some sort of conversation in the middle there. And I think both sides need to admit that, like, maybe it's not all a scam, but yes, people have also lost billions of dollars. So someone needs some protecting, and we need to have some sort of meeting in the middle where you don't just, not register and go straight to jail, but you maybe do have a path forward, and it's a little different from just being a broker.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what you said earlier about, like, how do you regulate decentralized systems? And, it's a lot of things in crypto claim to be decentralized. And I think that's, like, if you look at some of the bills that have come out, the proposed bills, they attempt to define decentralization to say, if you actually are decentralized, then that's one thing. If you're just like, if
you're 3 DAOs in a trench coat, like, that's another, but I honestly think there needs to be some sort of, I don't know how you measure intent, right? I think that's like an age-old question, but there has to be some sort of, are you intending to be decentralized? Are you trying to be some sort of federated, deconstructed system with less centralized control? And if that's the case, like, let's work on it. I'm also not sure that like true decentralization has happened yet for most things.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, it's a buzzword and people talk about it and it's an ideal and they'd love to get there. But things like Bitcoin might be sufficiently, decentralized to the point that it is different. So I don't think you can kind of blanket statement because there's different sorts of decentralization too. Like if you look at Blue Sky, the new AT app protocol, that's technically a decentralized system that they've built to model like a Twitter type social media platform or a Mastodon. That's decentralized without being a security. How are you going to register, that if it's a company? Because you're not really in control. Or when you're seeing things like Reddit, for example, having all of their protests they're having right now about, who's actually in control because it's really the users. How much of that company still belongs to the company? So these are real questions that I don't think there's easy, we just do it this way answer for. And it stretches to more than just securities law.
Yeah. All right. So last question then, and I'm going to put you on the same hot seat Gary Gensler was on during his oversight hearing. Is Ethereum a security?
Oh.
What do you
No, I actually don't think so.
Really?
I really don't think so. I think it is an ecosystem of things that could be considered securities, but I don't think the overall network that is Ethereum and the way that it is secured is necessarily a security.
And do you think that's what the SEC thinks right now, and that's why they have declined? But if they thought that, then why wouldn't he answer? Would it be because of what the...
Oh, you set me up so well for this.
All right.
Well, so there was something the other day about, it came out, I guess it was in actually the Ripple documents, right? Where the SEC said, like in all of these filings and things or internal communications where they were like, we don't want to say anything because it leaves us less room to maneuver.
Right.
So I don't think they know the answer. And that's okay. I actually think that's a perfectly fine thing for them to admit. I actually think it would have been better because then people wouldn't be so adamant that this is how things are and this is a security. And if anybody actually fully knew, we wouldn't be having these conversations. It's not that simple.
Right. I think people really miss that sometimes about like what the SEC's function is.
Yeah.
Like they're not your outside counsel. They're not here to like look at your filing or business and tell you that it's legal or not. They're just, they set up the framework of disclosure. You have to adhere to that. And then if you break the law, they might come after you for that.
Right. They set some rules and they go, okay, we try to maintain fair and orderly markets. That's really their whole, I actually think, mission statement is maintaining fair and orderly markets and protecting investors.
Right.
Neither of those things are arbitrating what's a security and what's not. So I'm not really sure how much of what their current actions are kind of just them realizing that Congress isn't going to do anything. So they're doing it because they answer to Congress. So, but no, I don't actually think that Ethereum itself is a security.
All right.
I think it might have been at some points in the past, which is why this is becoming so tricky. But I think if something is actually sufficiently decentralized, things change. So I don't know, how is there something where they're going to have like a deregistration process for things that becomes sufficiently decentralized? I think these are really, interesting questions that no one knows the answer to.
I did see like
the SEC,
some interesting thoughts about how maybe some of these cryptos, like you're saying, were securities when they were created and sold, and the people who were doing so were probably guilty of selling unregistered securities and could be in for a world of pain at some point. But
absolutely,
that once they're issued, there is a question.
They're out of everyone's control, So which does make it different.
Yeah,
that's not like a classic stock. So
no, right? I know
that don't fit in.
It's again, that's why we get paid the big bucks to talk about this stuff on a podcast.
Right. That's why I hang out on Twitter.
yeah, there you go. Well, this has been a wide-ranging conversation.
This was fun.
And so thanks for coming on. Really appreciated you joining us as our first. You're our first guest, So.
Oh my God! I didn't know that. I'm so wow. Thank you.
We've not had a guest yet. This is a new podcast. Nobody's really listening to it, so
that's okay.
One day this could be all part of history. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I'm really happy I got to.
Yeah, everyone should follow Chairman Berb Bernanke on whatever social media platform you're on. She's on many of them. I'm impressed.
I'm on many of them. My Twitter handle is Bone Condor, and if you're looking for me on Blue Sky, I am burb.baby, because that was really funny to me. So I actually went out and bought the website burb.baby so that I could have it as my
Oh, really? Nice.
Funniest $3 I've spent lately. So
perfect.
Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well,
thanks for having me on.
Anytime. As always, like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching this on. And if you liked it, give us a good rating. And we'll be back next week. And usually we tease what we're going to talk about next week, but we don't actually know this right now. So, we'll
see how much happens in the next week.
Exactly. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows what's going to happen? My Kraken comments could age really poorly.
Oh, yeah. That'd be perfect. Then we'll have you back and we can talk about it.
Great. Can't wait.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Make sure that you hit like and subscribe to our station so that you get notified whenever a new episode gets published. Be sure you check out our blog also. That's published on irvin.finance. A link will be dropped in the description of wherever you listen to this podcast, which is currently available through Amazon and Spotify. We also have a new YouTube channel that's come up, the Irvin Finance channel, that we have started publishing content on, which includes these podcasts as well as different meme shorts and current events. So make sure you tune in, like, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you.